Mr. Muhammad Ali, the caretaker Federal Minister for Energy, Petroleum and Power. And earlier he also served as the Chairman, Security and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, SECP. Our second panelist is a leading banker. He served as the president of several banks in Pakistan, and he worked abroad also. Currently, he is the Pakistan's Federal Bank's Ombudsman. Our third panelist is a very outstanding woman leader, Maheen Rahman. She is the CEO of Infazaman. And fourth panelist is from education sector, and I always say that he's only one in Pakistan, Wasif Rizvi, the president of Habib University. So why I picked this topic of the big picture? And what do you mean by big picture? 2 or 3 points I always shared in my speeches, in my sessions, as part of the narrative building for Pakistan. Pakistan today is the world's 5th largest population, with 250 million population here. And by 2047, our population size will be over 400 million. Out of 400 million, around 67% population will be under 29 years of age. So this is one data point. The second important data is that today, over 28 million kids are out of school. So we are not providing them education, and we are not providing them any vocational training, जिसे हम हुनर कहते हैं. तो ना तो हम तालीम दे रहे हैं और ना हम हुनर उनको दे रहे हैं. 25 करोड़ की पॉपुलेशन है, और आउट ऑफ ये जो 28 मिलियन किड्स हैं, इसके अलावा मिलियंस ऑफ किड्स वो हैं उस पब्लिक सेक्टर से वाबस्ता हैं जहां से आप मैट्रिक के बाद भी सिर्फ अपना नाम लिख सकते हैं. So, majority of you are aware about the Dr. Ishrat Husain's recent book we launched last year in November in Karachi, where he did the comparison of Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. So for me, the education is the biggest hurdle, the biggest problem in Pakistan. आप economy सही कर लें, आप चीजें सही कर लें, लेकिन आप वहीं पे खड़े होंगे, because you are not a small European country, you are not a small African country, you are world's 5th largest nation. So without fixing your fundamentals, including the education, you can't fix the problem. So this is the point number one. Then आपकी population का जो issue है, आज 25 करोड़ है, after 24 years, this will be 40 crore plus. So आप जिस level की भी growth कर लें, जिस तरीके से induction आपकी youth की हो रही है, जो बच्चे पैदा हो रहे हैं, ये आपका एक बहुत बड़ा issue है. Then फिर आपका water का issue है, climate issues हैं, फिर आपके health sector का issue है, और आज के context में एक बहुत बड़ा issue nation building का है. आपके अभी recent elections हुए हैं, सारा कुछ हुआ है, जो एक extreme polarization इस country में है, वो एक बहुत बड़ा issue है जिसे हमें settle करना होगा. Because without a united nation, we can't progress. So this is also one point which I want to highlight later. So the format is कि हमारे जो चारों panelists हैं, they will share their opening thoughts for 4 to 5 minutes each, and later we will ask the questions, and then we will open the floor for Q&A. We will start with Mr. Muhammad Ali, who is the caretaker Federal Minister for Energy. Over to you, Muhammad Ali.
Thank you, Asfar. And thank you to Karachi Literature Festival for organizing this. I think Asfar deliberately keeps the topic, the big picture, future of Pakistan, because it gives us a lot of liberty to touch upon various topics. But the way we approach the future of Pakistan can be from either an economic perspective, political perspective, or social perspective. What I'll try to do is, instead of talking about the future of Pakistan, which should be a prosperous and progressive in an ideal world, I think we need to talk about a self-reliant Pakistan. Unless we achieve self-reliance, we will not be able to achieve our eventual destination, which is a progressive and prosperous Pakistan. Now, in order to achieve a self-reliant Pakistan, I think there's a long list of actionable items that we all need to indulge in. But we need to start the journey somewhere. So I'll try to touch upon 3 ideas which I believe are achievable, which will have far-reaching consequences, and which will have a massive positive impact, and which will help us achieve our eventual destination of a happy and prosperous Pakistan. What are those 3 big ideas? Firstly, I think we need to focus and think about alignment between our political system and our economic system. Now, at the time of our independence, the world was still struggling with different political and economic models, and our political and economic models have been mapped out between the decades of 50s till 70s. Since then, a lot of countries around the world have aligned their political and economic model. अगर हम globally देखें, तो there are broadly 2 models which are being followed by successful countries. One model is followed by countries which either have a single party system like China, or countries which have centralized decision making like the Middle East. इन मुल्कों के अंदर गवर्नमेंट का फुटप्रिंट बहुत ज़्यादा है businesses में. In China and Middle East, we see governments owning and managing businesses, and they're doing it very successfully. Now, the reason they're able to do this is they have consistency of decision-making, which they achieve through continuity of leadership. The second model globally is a multi-party democratic system, which Pakistan has. आप दुनिया में कहीं भी देख लें, शायद ही कोई मल्टी-पार्टी democratic system होगा, जिसके अंदर governments are engaged in managing businesses. आप पूरे West को देख लें, governments do not manage businesses. And that's a very conscious decision, because in a multi-party democracy, different parties come and lead every few years. When new people come, they have a natural tendency for preferential appointment, for using state assets for their personal advantage, and that's how the accountability system breaks. So in a multi-party democracy, it is very, very difficult to achieve successes in businesses if the government is managing them. So Pakistan के अंदर we have a multi-party democracy, which is the Western model, but हमारा जो economic model है is still confused. There are some businesses which are owned by the private sector, and a lot of large businesses are still in the government hands. So if we want to achieve higher labor productivity, an efficient economic system, and if we want to ensure that the government officials are focused on policy making and not on managing businesses, we will have to come out of businesses. The government will have to reduce its footprint in the business, whether they are profitable or loss making. हम जब प्राइवेटाइजेशन की बात करते हैं तो पहला यूनिट हमारे जहन में आता है PIA, फिर आता है स्टील मिल. We do not think about the gas distribution companies or oil marketing companies or E&P companies which are profitable. But unless we come out of all the businesses, we will not be able to achieve economic growth which is needed for a country of 230 million people with a reasonably high population growth rate. So I think that's one idea that as a country we need to start working on. The second idea that I think we need to focus on, and that rhymes very well with what Asfar just mentioned, population growth बहुत ज़्यादा है, youth bulge है, education, water, climate, ये सारे issues हैं. Now, how do you manage these? So the second idea that I want to talk about is to reduce the unit size of the provinces and the cities that we have in Pakistan. At the time of independence, हमारे provinces की और cities की जो sizes थी वो population बहुत कम थी. Since then, our populations have grown, but the unit size has not changed. Unless we reduce the unit size with the objective to transfer the decision making at the grassroots level, we will not be able to solve the problems being faced on a day-to-day basis by all of us. So I think the other big thing that we need to do is to reduce the size of cities and provinces in a way that we have strong local governments. They should have their own budget. They should be responsible for attracting investments, and they should be responsible for investing and structuring the economic infrastructure within their own geographical region. So that's the second idea I think we need to focus on. The third idea, and the last one, which I want to talk about, is it is any state's responsibility to provide protection of life and livelihood to its people. And we cannot achieve this protection unless we have an effective judiciary in the country. हमारे यहाँ judiciary जो है at the higher level is highly focused on constitutional and political cases. It is the lower level जहाँ पर हमें judiciary को strengthen करना होगा. And unless we do this, we will not be able to retain our top talent, businesses will not flourish, investment will not come. So, at a very broad level, if we want to start the journey of seeing the big picture, having a progressive Pakistan, I think unless we have alignment of our political and economic models, unless we reduce the size of provinces and cities, and unless we focus on having an effective judicial system at the grassroots level, it will be very difficult for Pakistan to progress. So with these words, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. And now I will request Sirajuddin Aziz Saab for his remarks.
Thank you, Asfar sir. First and foremost, I think it's amazing that there are so many people sitting in the last session. So that's very encouraging to begin with. Before I embark upon making any observations about the big picture in the country, I think it is important that we, including of myself, make a collective, should I say, not a judgment call, but make a collective responsibility upon ourselves that we are directly responsible for the place that we have brought the country to. The cliff that we are hanging at is something that you and I are equally responsible. Now, whatever I say in the context of three subjects that I wanted to touch upon, some of it has been taken up, like education, and I wanted to talk something about the health aspect, and the third was the most critical of it, which is our foreign policy and the alignment with the economic policy of the country. So let me first and foremost comment a little bit about education. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you're fully aware of the fact that we have a budget deficit. So we have expenses running into 14 trillion and we have revenues of 12 trillion as a country. So that means we are overspending. That means we are all living beyond our means. Essentially, therefore, where are we spending this money? A major chunk of the 14 trillion goes towards your debt servicing. Then the other major taker of your expense item is your defense. And if you were to look at education focusedly, it is a shockingly low, dismal, single-digit allocation. That's the importance we have placed upon education. I want you to please join me in collectively visualizing sitting here in the year of the Lord of 2024 and imagine 2047 when inshallah this country will be celebrating its 100th anniversary of independence. Now on that 14th August 2047, can we visualize what kind of a 20-year-old would look like? How will that person be? He or she will be of the same quality as in 2024, or will that individual be different? And God forbid if our collective answer inwardly for each one of us is that it will not be different, then we haven't delivered together. And please bear in mind, I'm asking and requesting you to visualize sitting in 2024 of a child that is not born yet, because I talked of a 20-year-old in 2047. So there is 2 more years for that child to be born in Pakistan. Are we not preparing ourselves for it? If this kind of allocation were to take place, if you have 25 million and plus children below the age of 10 who are not even attending schools, what kind of a youth bulge will we create? One that will not be able to manage, as we currently are witnessing. We find our people who are in the field of politics making very tall claims when they thumb the rostrum and say, we are a nation that has got a 65% population below the age of 30. Very good. But what should we do with that asset? That asset is essentially untrained, uneducated mostly. So consequently, we have a situation here that for a school-going kid also, we can't get them to solve a two-digit arithmetic problem, let alone understand a full passage in English. Now you see the difference that we have allocated in terms of significance and importance to our national objectives. We need to relook at those. Even the Japanese are learning English, the Chinese speak English, and so does most of Europe. Our neighbor, when they were deciding what should be the national language of their state following independence, made a very, I would say, judicious conclusion that if Hindi was to be imposed on the whole of India, then the person in the north and the person in the south would not be able to communicate. I would remind you of the fact that when the Chief Minister of Mysore, Karnataka, got elected in India as Prime Minister in New Delhi, he could speak neither Hindi nor he could speak English. He could speak only Malayalam, so nobody understood him. But they made a very good decision in 1949 when they decided that the country will have two state languages. First was Hindi, second was English. Consequently, today we find that most of the organizations, global organizations, are headed by Indians, not because they are intelligent than us. I refuse to accept that as a Pakistani. I think we are far more superiorly intelligent people. The only issue is the lack of communication skills, where we are unable to deliver and negotiate to our advantage. I'll give you a small example. When Bill Gates visits Pakistan, or our leadership meets Bill Gates, what do we ask him for? We ask him for polio injections. That's what we ask him for. And he gives it willingly from the Belinda Gates Foundation. And what does our neighbor's prime minister ask for? He says, I want you to establish another 50 incubators, IT incubators in India, and train my people in technology. It's a difference of approach. Bertrand Russell was once asked, what is a good time to educate a child? And he did not battle the eyelid and just remarked and said, at least 100 years before he or she is born. Now, what was he trying to emphasize upon? The need to plan what we want to our people to be in the future. That's the kind of education we need to give. The world has moved from STEM to STEAM. And I don't know what our slogan or abbreviation or acronym is when it comes to education. I would tend to think it is FOIL, standing for flourishing illiteracy. That's the tragedy. Now, the health sector on the other side of the coin is equally important, because a healthy child is a guarantee of the future of the country. Now, when you allocate less than 27 billion rupees out of your total budget of 14 trillion to health sector, what can you expect? And the tragedy, ladies and gentlemen, of that 27 billion, something like 450 million is only allocated for administration of hospitals. That's the dilemma. Where are we spending money? Not in research, not in getting the right medical equipment into the country, but on administering what we have. So there is no new creation happening. In conjunction with this, and please do understand that I'm not trying to contradict an opinion, I'm trying to offer you an alternative opinion. On the economic models, since I've had the great opportunity of working in China, I can tell you with confidence that state ownership is not a bad thing to begin with. There's nothing wrong with state ownership. Yes, what's wrong is interference in the running of the organization. That's bad. So we come down to governance. If our politicians and our policymakers can keep themselves away from the management of those institutions, then state ownership is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. They can produce equally good profits. And we have seen that in the financial industry. It's the same people running it, except that the ownership has changed. So if you keep the ownership and not interfere and give professional management to institutions, you can still create profits. We are, as I mentioned to you, spending more rupees than we earn. The story is not different on the foreign currency side. We are spending more foreign currency than we are earning. Our exports are at a low of 39 billion. Our imports are at a high of 89, 90 billion dollars. There's a massive trade gap out there. If you were to examine Pakistan's trade patterns, it's shockingly low. If you look at the top 5 countries of imports and exports, that configuration in the last 2 decades hasn't changed. What does that indicate? We have not been able to find new markets for our products and services, or we have been unable to negotiate. So it brings us to the question of what kind of foreign policy are we following? Our foreign policy, in my personal opinion, resides still in the 50s and the 60s when we were part of CENTO and CETO, because the objective then was political, not economic, containment of the communist thought. That was the reason we joined those organizations. Now, when we abandoned it, we are still following some of its principles and not concentrating on making our foreign policy to remain in conjunction with our economic policy. They need to be docked together. China is a case in point. Excellent friendship we have on a political level, but when it comes to economic relations, it's on the low side. New Delhi in Beijing is still considered an enemy country. Yet, if you see the investments the Chinese have made in India, which is a 1.5 billion persons market, they have made investments close to $100 billion. And what is the investment in Pakistan? $46 billion allocated to CPEC, and the remaining trade flows are in the low of $18 to $20 billion, of which the Chinese dispute our import figure, because we seem to be smudging our figures as well. So we can spend a very long time discussing various aspects, but at the end of the day, I think what is critically important is governance at the level of political leadership, governance at the corporate leadership. We have to get there in order to get all the segments of the economy to be well-oiled and to be harnessed together to be productive as a nation. I think I've gone a little beyond the allocated time, sorry.
Thank you, Siraj Saab. And now over to you, Maheen Rahman.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you to KLF for having me here and Asfar for hosting this wonderful panel, and it's so good to see the hall full at this time. I think the topic, the big picture, is a tough one. And also, where's the future of Pakistan is perhaps also very enigmatic. But if I break this down into maybe 3 outcomes. 1, do we believe the future is bright? 2, do we believe the future is dismal? Or 3, do we just believe that the future is the same as the past? And maybe, Asfar, if you will allow me, because we have such a wonderful audience here, maybe it's a good time to poll them. Yes. So how many people in the audience, and maybe raise your hands, how many people here believe the future is bright? About 20% of the hall. How many believe it's dismal? 20% of the hall again. How many believe it's the same as the past? About 10% of the hall. So that leaves 40% of the hall seems a little undecided. But maybe I give my view here. I think the future is actually very bright. And I think the reason the future is bright is because of all the factors that these gentlemen here have pointed out. And that's our population, and that's our youth. And while we do not have the ability, perhaps today, and something we want to work towards is to educate that youth, but we certainly have a youth which is very self-aware, technologically empowered, and well aware of what their rights as citizens of Pakistan are. And I think that's something we can really build upon for the future. And I think our role, given where we are at our stage of life, and given that we are now in the minority when it comes to the average person in the population, average age of 21, I think our role really is to enable that youth to now realize its potential. And I think we've talked a lot about education on this panel, but what happens after they're educated? We still have 3 million educated 18, 19, 20-year-olds coming into Pakistan's job market every year. Where will they go? Where are the job opportunities for them? And I think if we look at a few sectors which we really should focus on over the next 4 to 5 years or so, we can really enable our youth to find good, gainful employment here. One of those is agriculture, a very neglected sector of Pakistan, but one with the most potential, and one which for our future can feed us for the next 50 years. So food security, enabling corporate farming, changing agricultural processes, getting new technology in to allow our youth to be part of that process. And so enable our food security for the future. The second area would be our energy resilience. We've got the caretaker energy minister here, but at the end of the day, Pakistan's natural resources are not oil and gas. They are wind, they are the sun, they are the water. And the more we push towards renewable energy, the more we are able to be resilient and stand on our feet when it comes to energy. When it comes to the higher tariffs that we are seeing, nobody likes paying those electricity bills, hence everybody is moving towards solar. And it's a natural economic shift. There is no policy that has come in place to force it. The other thing that we need to do for our youth is enable access to finance. Getting a bank loan in this country is next to impossible unless you are top 300 borrower. The amount of lending that we as a country do as a percentage of our GDP is the lowest among emerging markets. It's about 15% of our GDP that we actually give to companies. If we're not able to provide our companies the financing they need to grow, how can we ever expect them to be a large solution to the problems that we face today? We can't keep relying on government and state-owned enterprises. We know how that experiment went. So our banking system needs to adjust, and the finance sector as a whole needs to be far more inclusive. And finally, and I think the last point I'll make here, is within our youth, we have a segment, half of it, which we don't seem to be able to capitalize on. And that's our women. Only 20% of women end up in our labor force. And that's the real tragedy. 20% of our educated doctors who are women do not practice. And you can see that across the board. So I think these issues are not really related to the individuals themselves, but they're a collective action point. And if for those of you in the audience believe the future is bright or the future is dismal, there is a chance in your hands as a collective, as a society, to really change the way we look at women, to see how we enable their economic empowerment, their access to education, their political empowerment, their access to justice. We have a terrible history of acquitting rapists and murderers. So how are we ever going to move ahead if half the population is held back and does not feel empowered enough to contribute to our future? It cannot be done in the old way. It really has to shift. And that's a collective responsibility that's on all of us as a society. Thank you.
Thank you, Maheen. And now our last panelist, Mr. Wasif Rizvi, the president of Habib University.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, KLF, and especially Asfar, for inviting me here. being the last panelist, it's my unpleasant duty to create a bit of unease and confusion. So, staying within the theme, I actually approached the question of big picture very differently. It has some commonality with what Maheen spoke, but for me, the big picture actually is truly, literally the big picture. And in one word, which is cliched, but I hope there is a better explanation for that word, is chaos. So chaos is the primordial God. Before anything, there was chaos. Chaos actually necessarily is not a bad term. English में वो खराब हो गई है, लेकिन Greeks saw chaos as potentiality, as possibility. Something can emerge out of chaos. And it could be either horrific or could be actually beautiful. So why is it the time of chaos, right? And the time of chaos is that we are actually experiencing something as a species and as a planet that we actually did not see for 250 million years. आप में से ज़्यादातर ने वो जुरासिक पार्क वाली फिल्में देखी होंगी, उसमें चिकसुलुब जो that meteor that killed off, that was 65 million years ago. But that wasn't the big kill event. The biggest kill event that happened is known as the Permian Triassic extinction that happened 250 million years ago. So what were the key features? Just then 95% of the planet was killed off. So what was the key feature of the Permian Triassic period? So whatever records are there, ocean suddenly became very warm. Temperature climbed. Especially ocean became inhabitable. Or because most of the life existed in the ocean, it ended up killing, in over a period of 40 million years, 95% of the species. And somehow that phenomena never repeated itself for 250 million years ago. 25 crore saal se, this did not happen until now. So, उसके बाद जो oceanic dead zones जो कहलाते थे, they stabilized at 4 to 10 anywhere in the world. In 1960, there were 10 dead zones in the ocean. इसका मतलब है वो जगह समुद्र में जहाँ ऑक्सीजन और न्यूट्रिएंट्स इतने कम हो गए हैं कि वहाँ पे कोई फॉर्म ऑफ लाइफ जिंदा नहीं रह सकता. 1960 में वो 10 थे. 25 करोड़ साल में continuously there were 10. Guess how many are there now? इस वक्त कितने होंगे? 415. So, in 25 crore saal, they reached 10. From 1960 to now, they are 415. The second largest dead zone of ocean is in Gulf of Mexico, which is 6,000 square miles. Guess where is the biggest? And how big is it? It's 10 times bigger. It's 63,000 square miles. ये जिस क्रीक पे हम बैठे हुए हैं, 1975 में इसका पानी was 9 degrees cooler. 9 degrees. It is more rapidly heating than the South Pole. Right? Something weird happened in the 1970s. We built a massive dam on the river that used to keep this ocean alive. And in the process, we created the biggest oceanic dead zone anywhere on the planet, in the Arabian Sea. It's not in the Pacific Ocean, it's not in the Atlantic, it's not in the Indian Ocean, it's right here. So it literally is that particular time when anything can happen, the time of chaos. That's the big picture. And obviously we didn't cause it, we inherited this world in 1947, but we were founded on some of the most toxic and horrific myths, which is known as the Western civilization, industrial civilization. उसका foundational myth ये है कि individual vices will yield to public good. That's the actual classical formation. Personal, individual, material gain is the sole purpose of our existence, as per this particular myth. Now, you can continue to live on in this myth as long as you can pretend that this world is an infinite resource or it is an infinite garbage can. Now, both of these things are not true, right? We are sitting at one of the world's most critical climate juncture in this region of the world, Pakistan. As I just talked to you, okay, this is the most rapidly heating creek, and this is the deadest of all the seas, which is right next to us. तो chaos के बाद और primordial gods सामने आए, उसमें से एक था Tartarus, which is basically a symbol for hell, complete destruction, agony. लेकिन उसके साथ ही साथ there was another one, which is known as Eros, which is the god of love, of compassion, of potentiality, of creativity. I actually do agree with Maheen. There is a lot of reason for us to believe that जो 240 million लोग हैं यहाँ पर, उसमें से 250 million के करीब, 235 million के करीब actually continue to have this more of an eros in their heart and less of the Tartarus. So the very fact that ये region अभी तक completely infect नहीं हुआ इस self-destructive, narcissistic pursuit से, इस बात का इम्कान है कि we have the potential to actually create a different view of reality in the world through our own epistemic means. अपने means, अपनी values, अब सिर्फ वो कानों को भला लगने वाली बातें नहीं हैं. They may be essential for the survival, and this survival is now the survival of the species. Thank you.
Thank you, Wasif. Now the house is open for question and answer. There is one disclaimer कि please सवाल मुख्तसर रखें और डिबेट से परहेज करें. अमीन हाशमानी प्लीज. माइक यहाँ पे अमीन भाई को दें. वॉलंटियर्स ये इधर दें, आगे दें, आगे सामने. अमीन हाशमानी
ये बैठे.
My question to all the panelists, I think we all know क्या problem है. We even know the solutions. At KLF, we've seen everyone debating. Problem है implementation का, right? And like we say, everyone wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die, right? You need to make those hard, tough decisions. We are not socially ready to make those tough sacrifices. We do not have the institutional capacity. Politically, it's a toxic political environment where we cannot have consensus. So for me, the crux is actually, not the problem kya hai ya solution kya hai. It's all about implementation. Mohammad Ali, on your thing, I think private sector, public sector, I think debate, we need both. It's a question of, like you mentioned, about governance, right? Bank of Punjab is actually a public sector corporation. You see, they are as good as the best banks in the country, right? It is a public sector. It's all about governance and everything. Wasif, aapka tha on species ka. I think 99.9% of all species throughout human history have been extinct. Why should human race be the exception?
Yes, please. Introduce yourself.
Yes, please. Bilal Ahmed Sheikh. I'm in the energy sector for all my life, doing cogeneration power projects for the industry. So I know the numbers. First of all, is it okay? This introduction is okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Question should be brief, please.
Yes, please. The grid power per kilowatt hour, the fuel cost is 8 rupees 26 paisas. And we are paying 55 rupees per kilowatt hour because of the huge capacity charges, which are unutilized because the industry, which is the major consumer of electricity, still wants to utilize RLNG at a subsidized rate. Am I right? Okay. Now the problem is, there are problems, obviously the challenges are there, And those have to be resolved. And we, from the private sector, want to help the decision makers. The objective is to reduce instead of giving subsidy to the textilers, to reduce the MMCFD of RLNG by 200 MMCFD, which we can do. It will be challenging, but that will reduce the burden of foreign exchange that the country is spending on importing RLNG. Okay. Sorry.
Please be brief.
Okay. 140,000 gigawatt hours, the total consumption of Pakistan, NEPRA report. 48,000 megawatt of power installed capacity, including hydel, nuclear, K2, K3, coal power plants. Energy mix is very good. We don't have cohesion because right now a 660 megawatt of Genco 1 supercritical power plant is under commissioning at Jamshoro. And that will
Sir,
be...
आपका question क्या है? Please, direct question करें.
Question is, I'm trying to tell you that there's a letter from APTMA sent to you, Mr. Muhammad Ali, and they are asking for subsidy. And I'm trying to tell here that please do not give any subsidy, ask them to switch over to grid power. There are problems because I'm an electrical engineer and there are problems, but we are here to solve the problems. The solution is there, but the people who are running the industry do not understand. And then I can discuss with you.
I will answer this.
Okay,
I got
please.
the question. Thank you. I'll answer.
I have the mic. May I ask a question? Asfar Saab? I have the mic.
Yes, please.
Can
Maybe ये पहले को answer दे दें.
Action. All right.
आप पहले answer दे दें.
Very quickly, I'll answer this first. I'll touch upon this. There is no subsidy being given to the industry at the moment. इस वक्त पाकिस्तान में जो इंडस्ट्री है टोटल वो 244 बिलियन रुपीस एक्स्ट्रा पेमेंट करती है और उसका जो फ़ायदा होता है जो हम सब्सिडी दे रहे हैं इस मुल्क में वो हम डोमेस्टिक कंज्यूमर्स को दे रहे हैं, स्पेशली जो लोअर इनकम लेवल कंज्यूमर हैं. टोटल पाकिस्तान में 592 बिलियन की सब्सिडी दी जाती है डोमेस्टिक कंज्यूमर को. तो ये गलत इंप्रेशन है, पहली बात. दूसरी बात, जो मसाइल हैं वो ये हैं कि बिजली बहुत महंगी है, गैस बहुत महंगी है. बिजली में ख़ास तौर पे दो बड़े इश्यूज़ हैं. हमने जो माजी में पिछले 15-20 साल में जो पॉलिसी जो कॉन्ट्रैक्टिंग की है वो गलत की है. सेकेंडली, ये कॉन्ट्रैक्ट हुए थे जब रुपी डॉलर पैरिटी 60 रुपए का डॉलर था, 80 रुपए का था, 100 रुपए का था. अब आज अगर 300 रुपए का डॉलर है तो जाहिर बात है कि बिजली 3-4 गुना हो जाएगी. तो हमने ये चीज़ें सोची नहीं थी माजी में, ये गलतियाँ वहाँ पर हुई. तो इन मसाइल को असल में होता ये है कि हम बिजली और गैस के रेट को रोकने की कोशिश करते हैं. ये कभी भी नहीं रुकेंगे जब तक हमारा करेंसी स्ट्रांग नहीं होगा. अगर कल को डॉलर और बढ़ गया तो बिजली और बढ़ जाएगी, सीधी सी बात है. तो हमें अपनी करेंसी को स्ट्रेंथन करना होगा और वो होगी थ्रू इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स एंड थ्रू एक्सपोर्ट्स. सो दैट्स द सोल्यूशन. Very quickly, because you mentioned about, and others may want to contribute, implementation. Absolutely right. Problem, solution पता है. But implementation के लिए, we have to begin somewhere. देखिए, एक जो ये theory है कि institutions strong हो जाएंगे, तो चीज़ें सही हो जाएंगी. Institutions कैसे strong होंगे? Where do you start? Institution strong करने के लिए आपको अच्छे लोग चाहिए, अच्छे systems चाहिए. उन लोगों की appointment करती है सरकार. उस सरकार में एक मिनिस्टर होता है, कुछ सरकारी अफसर होते हैं, वो अपने जानने वाले लगा देते हैं, एक नेचुरल टेंडेंसी. तो ये बिगिनिंग जहाँ करनी होगी आपको इम्प्लीमेंटेशन की, हमें आई बिलीव कि हमें अपने इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम को सही करना पड़ेगा. देखिए, दुनिया में कहीं भी इंस्टीट्यूशंस पहले सही नहीं हुए. पहले प्रॉस्पेरिटी आई. जब प्रॉस्पेरिटी आई, एजुकेशन सही हुई, हेल्थ सही हुई, क्लाइमेट सही हुआ, लोग सही हुए और इंस्टीट्यूशन सही हुए. इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ जो आएगी वो उस वक्त तक नहीं आ सकती है. एंड आई एग्री विथ यू एंड सिराज साहब कि गवर्नेंस सही करनी है. लेकिन गवर्नेंस आप कैसे सही करेंगे? गवर्नेंस उस वक्त सही होगी जब सरकार सही होगी. सो इट्स अ चिकन एंड एग प्रॉब्लम. सो इट्स नॉट गवर्नमेंट्स बिजनेस टू बी इन द बिजनेस एट ऑल. When we take out government from the businesses, then private sector will be able to thrive. Then there'll be wealth creation. There'll be more taxes. There'll be more money in the country to meet your expenses. So we have to begin somewhere, and that's where the implementation point comes. And that's what I believe we need to answer, which is not a very difficult thing to answer. Our political and economic system have to be aligned. Government has to, अगर मिनिस्ट्री में जो लोग बैठे हैं वो सुबह से शाम तक उनको फिक्र है कि जी कौन सी कंपनी में कौन सा डायरेक्टर लगाएं, सीईओ कौन होगा, इंटरव्यूज चल रहे हैं, मुझे इस बोर्ड पे बैठना है, उस बोर्ड पे बैठना है, तो आप मुझे बताएं पॉलिसी कब बनेगी? हमारी सरकार को बिजनेस से आप निकालेंगे, then they will focus on policy, on water, on education, on health. So I think that's the starting point towards implementation.
Madam Shanaz Wazir Ali.
जी,
Yes,
thank you very much, असफर. देखिए आज के पैनल में भी तालीम के बारे में बात हुई कि तकरीबन 27 मिलियन बच्चे आउट ऑफ स्कूल हैं, जो बच्चे इन स्कूल हैं वो सही तरीके से पढ़ नहीं सकते, और बहुत सारी और बातें जिसमें आपने वजाहत की सिराजुद्दीन सिद्दीकी साहब के, सिराजुद्दीन अजीज़ साहब के there should be high priority attention to education. I'm an educationist. I've spent 45 years of my life in education. And it is finally good to hear senior people coming from the economic sector, banking sector, from a minister and others, apart from us educationists, that there is an education crisis. There has been an education crisis in Pakistan for 50 to 60 years. And there is today a deep, deep crisis, not only in education, but in health. There is also a need to talk about family planning, apart from just education, and I'm very sad to hear that nobody talks about family planning, not family control, but this woman as a decision maker at the center of family life, which Maheen Sahiba talked about, that make women, give them power and autonomy and finance them so that they can make the right sort of decisions for their families and their children. I want to ask one question, sir, from you, since you represent the federal government, and also from Siraj Saab, because you are part of the business sector, and Maheen also. Why is it that when national security is talked about, why don't we say education is a security issue today? You have got millions of people who are not educated, not trained. Those who are in schools and even in certain colleges and universities are unemployable. We are producing a very serious, large cohort of this remarkable figure that we are talking about, that we will be 250 million, which we will be if we go at this rate. The governments of Pakistan for the last 40 years have hardly ever given more than 2% of their budget to education. Why we have a great big special initiative
Please be brief.
facilitation committee. Kindly take this up. This is a very, very big issue. And not just, I would request you, why has this not happened? Why is it not a priority in anybody's discussions?
Yes, please, madam.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much to the whole panel, but I would like to ask Maheen Rahman on the 2 points that you mentioned. One of them was 3 lakhs graduates qualifying every year, and the other was women employment. On the first point, could she not consider that the graduates who have learned how to learn, can they not be taught, for instance, apprenticeship, so they can learn how to get through life? And the apprenticeship, could they please consider what is below their dignity and what is not below their dignity? The second question is about women's employment. Have you considered the proportion of those women, illiterate women, who actually serve rich, affluent classes in their housework? Do your statistics cover that group or not? Thank you.
Yes, please. Yes, please answer.
Okay, maybe I can answer this and then we go to the next question. So on women, I fully agree with you. The problem actually in Pakistan is twofold. One, we don't count all women's work. So when it comes to the farms, agricultural work, when it comes to urban household work, it's not counted in the statistics. And actually, these women are very important contributors to the economy. So it doesn't get reflected in our numbers. But even then, the real problem, I tell you, is when we do even have women that are educated, that are that are graduates, the ability for them to be part of the workforce in a meaningful way, the opportunities are not there. And I tell you, I sit on the management committee of the OICCI, the Overseas Chamber as well, which represents about 200 odd companies, which are all foreign owned in Pakistan. And we've done a survey on what are the reasons that we see less representation. So in the corporate sector, it's about 15% representation of women. And when you go to senior leadership, it is barely 10%. So what happens? And by and large, the biggest answer we get from the women themselves is, we don't want to work. We don't want to work because the environments, the corporate environments, are not conducive. They do not give us the right either safety nets, they don't provide us with the right childcare options, and sometimes our family issues are such that we cannot even enter the workforce. So while we are considering all the women in the informal space that don't get counted, the ones that can get counted are choosing to step out of the workforce because of the environments that we as a corporate sector have created. That's on us. And that's something that we have to change. And when I come back to your point on education, fully agree. It is an absolute emergency. And I think we have woken up very late. But at the same time, we have advantages that we didn't have 20, 30 years ago. We have the use of technology. We have a very technologically literate population. They're not necessarily educated in the traditional sense, but they're very literate when it comes to using a phone or a smartphone. We need to be able to use these things to our advantage, which we haven't done yet. And if I can just address Amin Saab's point on implementation. So I think while we can all sit and blame government, that government has done this, government has done that, or not done this, or not, and that the politics is toxic, we as the elite, and when we talk about corporate elite, we haven't done much either, right? Other than take tax breaks and concessions and subsidies. So we need to look at ourselves. And I tell you what was very interesting to sort of, if you follow what's happened over the last year, we have basically gone economically to the brink of default and back. And what happened at that default stage? We suddenly saw that businesses that didn't have local supply chains started looking around for local supply chains because they couldn't import. We suddenly found that those who were in traditional businesses started looking at non-traditional businesses because they realized there's more money perhaps to be made over here. And there was a forced economic shift in the entire country. So I think when our back is against the wall, we do respond, and we don't look to government to respond either. We respond because our own economic necessity depends on it, and I think we need to see more of that. I think the problem comes when we mix up our own vested interests with the interests of the country, which are not always aligned. But that's on us, and that's something we have to change as the corporate sector.
Thank you, Maheen. One last question,
Excuse
please.
me.
This is the last question.
I thought good governance
Actually, they are
was
showing
the
me the
key.
last 5 minutes. Yes, please.
I thought good governance was the key to bring about more efficiency in the SOEs, right? So when we had independent directors who were PICG certified, and now we are nominating Addi ka ek banda, ek MQM ka banda, और एक Balochistan के minister का बेटा का भाई और बेटा or something or the other. How do we expect good governance? How do we expect the SOEs that were bleeding so profusely previously or continue to bleed profusely, and we're trying to stop it, and now you're again going back to the same old stuff?
Any answer you want to give? Okay, so time is over. I want to request all the panelists for 1 minute each closing remark because our cutoff time is 5:45. Please, over to you. Wasif, 1 minute each.
Yes. Something fell. Again, I just, this last 1 minute is drawing attention to what I was talking about. There is a sort of kind of an offensive anecdote shoved in by the Orientalists about Baghdad of medieval time. But let's assume it's true, which is a number of intellectual elite at the time were discussing कि क्या सुई की नोक पर कितने फरिश्ते आ सकते हैं when Helaku Khan was knocking at the door. So I think in the wake of the challenge that we are facing, especially physically and climatically, sometimes I feel that the nature of our conversation is not too different than the conversation of that Baghdad folks. I would like to encourage all of you and the panelists as well that whenever we're thinking of any kind of big picture, we have to really look literally at the big picture of this self-imposed annihilation of the planet and the difference between the other 99, which is a very disputed figure, just invented actually by climate deniers, so it's not accurate. But let's say it's true that no one species created a toxic odor which became unbearable for the whole planet prior to that. So this is a very, very bizarre, psychopathic turn of event as far as the global history is concerned.
Mr. Sirajul Aziz, please.
मैं एजुकेशन पे ही रहना चाहूँगा। जो हम अनएम्प्लॉयड यूथ की बात कर रहे हैं उनकी कैफियत सिर्फ आपको बताने के लिए ज़रूरी है कि एक इंटरव्यू के दौरान जब कैंडिडेट से पूछा गया कि आपने इंग्लिश लिटरेचर में ये पढ़ा हुआ है, इम्तिहान पास किया हुआ है, तो आपके फेवरेट ऑथर कौन है, तो जो साहबजादे थे वो एक फ्रिजिड फेस, आर्टिक फ्रोज़न फेस के साथ देखते रहे। तो फिर इंटरव्यूअर ने फिर पूछा कि ये आपका सीवी है, तो उन्होंने कहा जी ये मेरा सीवी है। तो उन्होंने कहा कि इस पर लिखा है, कह रहे अच्छा ये लिखा है कि मैंने इंग्लिश लिटरेचर में किया है। ये कैफियत है, ये हकीकत है, यकीन जानिए आप। अच्छा, तालीम के साथ दूसरी चीज़ जो मेरी तवज्जो से हट गई थी बात करते हुए, वो है तरबियत का मामला। तरबियत ज़ामिन होती है गवर्नेंस की। अगर तरबियत सही हो तो गवर्नेंस भी सही होती है। तरबियत में कमी बेशी हो जाए तो गवर्नेंस नहीं होती।
Maheen.
Gee, I think the future is us. It's all of you, it's all of us sitting here. And it's the decisions we make, whether on an individual level or on a corporate level or on a collective level. लेकिन reality ये है कि जो decisions हमने बनाई हैं अपने self-interest में, they may not be the best things for society in the future. So while we have made a decision in terms of who to vote for, who not to vote for, हकीकत ये है कि एक government आने वाली है, and we have to ask ourselves now, how will we engage with them next in terms of changing the paradigm that perhaps all of us really want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Maheen. And now Muhammad Ali for the closing summary.
Thank you, Asfar. I think everything that has been talked about is all relevant. Education, vocational training. आपको जो सवाल था, हम तो केयरटेकर गवर्नमेंट में है तो 5-6 माह हुए हैं, लेकिन जस्ट टू टच अपॉन व्हाट यू रेज्ड द पॉइंट कि 2% जो है एजुकेशन का बजट वो फेडरल गवर्नमेंट का होता है, बट बिकॉज एजुकेशन इज अ प्रोविंशियल सब्जेक्ट, तो इफ़ यू ऐड द बजट एलोकेशन ऑफ प्रोविंसेस तो वो ज़्यादा होगा। हैविंग सेड दिस, हमने फोकस ही नहीं किया उसके ऊपर। देखिए दुनिया में हमारे आसपास के रीजन में कितनी डिमांड है लोगों की, और हम खुद देखते हैं कि मिडल ईस्टर्न कंट्रीज में other countries are sending their people by training them, और हम पीछे रह गए। एक ज़माने में हम आगे थे। तो वोकेशनल ट्रेनिंग, एजुकेशन, ये तो बेसिक चीज़ें हैं दुनिया में। तो यू आर एब्सोल्युटली राइट। हेल्थ के ऊपर जो टच किया सराज साहब ने, माहिन टच्ड अपॉन जेंडर एंड अदर थिंग्स एंड क्लाइमेट। तो सर जो आपका पॉइंट है तो फिर तो हम होंगे ही नहीं unless we focus on that. That's a huge issue we are facing. But as far as the future is concerned, if I combine the theme of chaos and whether the future is bright or dismal, so we will have to decide as a country, depending on our actions, our policies, our direction, that will decide na ki future dismal hoga ya bright hoga. We can wish it to be bright, but we need to take the right step. And I'll go to what Amin said, ke how will the implementation begin? But frankly, we have to be realistic. We can dream big, which is good. But आज की reality ये है कि we are not a self-reliant nation. We are not. हम IMF के पास जाते हैं, हम कोई भी डिसीजन लेते हैं तो हमें IMF से पूछना पड़ता है. We are not self-reliant. हमारे यहाँ FX का मसला है, 10-12 बिलियन डॉलर के रिजर्व्स हैं. हमारी एक्सपोर्ट्स बहुत कम है इंपोर्ट के मुकाबले में. हमारी एनर्जी मैसिवली इंपोर्ट होती है. FX के अलावा हमारा टैक्स कलेक्शन का बहुत बड़ा मसला है, फिस्कल डेफिसिट है, मुल्क में नुकसान है, डेट बढ़ रहा है. तो वी आर नॉट अ सेल्फ रिलायंट नेशन टुडे. नाउ हाउ डू वी बिगिन? ये जो KLF ऑर्गेनाइज हुआ है, सरकार का इसमें कोई हाथ नहीं है. जो IT इंडस्ट्री साल का 3-4 बिलियन डॉलर का एक्सपोर्ट करती है, सरकार का उसमें कोई हाथ नहीं है. सरकार सिर्फ फैसिलिटेट करती है. तो वी नीड टू अनलीश द एनर्जी एंड क्रिएटिविटी ऑफ आवर पीपल. Where we have failed is we have centralized and controlled the decision making in the corridors of power in Islamabad or in the provincial assemblies. Unless we decentralize that, unless we work towards unleashing the energies and creativity of our people, we will not be able to achieve our true potential. And in order to do that, we need to empower people. We need to let go of the control that we have. And for that, it's important that either we come up with a mechanism to achieve this in the existing model that we have, which I feel is very, very difficult. And Punjab is bigger than a lot of countries around the world. Somebody was telling me Punjab is probably the 10th largest, equal to the 10th largest country in the world. It's a 100 million people province. How do you manage that? I mean, it's proven that large provinces or states or cities are very difficult to manage. I mean, we ourselves go abroad and we see that people have broken down the unit size and they have empowered people on the ground. So unless we empower people, unless we get more women in the workforce, we have better gender balance, and unless we unleash this energy, it will be very difficult for us to progress as a nation. And I think that's where the journey begins. These are not very difficult decisions. Thinking about and planning about our political versus economic system, about education, about gender, about climate, and all of this can happen. But we need to have a mechanism whereby decision-making is taken where it matters and where it resides. With these words, thank you very much.
Thank you. And with these words, I want grateful to Muhammad Ali, Mr. Sirajuddin Aziz, Mahin Rahman, and Mr. Wasif Rizvi, and all of you for your participation here. Thank you. Pakistan Zindabad.